Hey, good morning, everybody. It is, what is today, May 14th?
May 15th.
May 15th, 8:30 in the morning. We're in the library, and this is a meeting of the Financial Forecasting Committee, and I'd like to call the meeting to order and have an acceptance of the agenda. Someone can make that motion.
Second.
Second by Jim. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Actually, we'll probably have to, so Jerry, do you agree?
Do you want me to do the roll call?
Yeah, if you don't mind.
Okay.
So on all these votes, we just have to do a roll call vote.
Okay, everybody's got names. Mr. Karsha?
Here.
Mr. Griffin?
Here.
You're
You said
accepting
yes.
the motion of the acceptance of the agenda.
No.
Mr. Karsha?
Yes.
Yes.
Mr. Griffin?
Aye.
Pam?
Yes.
Paul?
Yes. Don.
Tony?
Yes.
Jim?
Yes.
Mr. Kelly on the line, on the conference call?
Abstain, I wasn't at the meeting.
No, it's this meeting to accept the agenda.
Oh, this is, oh, the agenda.
He said yes.
Aye. Mr. DeVito? Joe?
Aye.
Mr. Gates? Peter?
Yes.
Great. Okay. So the reason for this meeting is to get us all together. We, as you all know, or most of you know, we went through the financial forecast earlier in the year. We made some assumptions, and the world has changed since then, and we want to revisit these assumptions. The few main ones are the state aid money that we'll be getting, and then there's a few expense lines that we think may be impacted by the pandemic stuff that we're going through. Just as a quick recap, we ended up going with the governor's budget for the state aid number, which had a not significant, but an increase over last year. What was it, 8%, Nancy, that we went
It
with?
was a significant increase, yes.
Yeah, so like an 8% increase, and all of our guts are probably saying that may not happen. So what we want to do is start forecasting for that. We have no idea what the number will be, but just making sure there's the camera. So we just want to get some guidelines together and get some different parameters and different models together in case these numbers change. So Nancy, Jim, and myself met earlier this week and decided to get this meeting together and had a few items that we wanted to discuss specifically, and then we can talk more about any other items that people have in mind. Did you want to, the agenda is on the screen up there. If we want, that's just a quick overview. Does anyone want to review the existing one? You have it in front of you. So the existing forecast. Can you go back to the agenda for 1 second? So everybody has that in front of you, and then there's the next point that we want to bring up is the specific areas, the shared costs that we want to go over. Does anyone have any need to go over what we've done in our last meeting, the existing forecast that we're working with? Anyone on the phone?
No.
Oh, great. All right, so we'll jump right in. So the revenue streams that are likely to be affected by the COVID-19 pandemic that we're going through are meals tax. And why don't we just go through one at a time and talk about them? We've got the meals tax in there that's forecasted at $230,000. Clearly, that is going to be impacted. Nancy, do you want to go over what the assumptions of that were?
Sure, so we don't use meals tax for any of our operational budgets. 20% of the estimated meals tax revenue is used for the EDC, Economic Development Commission budget. $100,000 offsets the impact of the middle school public safety debt exclusion impact on taxpayers, and the remaining balance supports the capital plan. So for fiscal 20, we net our estimate, but as everyone is aware currently with the restrictions on restaurants and what they're allowed to do, it is unlikely that we will meet our estimate for fiscal 21, so the question is what should we revise our estimate to, and how should it affect the three items that meals tax supports right now? Do we still want to support the debt exclusion? Do we still want to support EDC? Do we still want to support the capital plan? Or do we want to, how much of each do we want to take away?
Thanks.
Nancy, we're having a very difficult time hearing you on the phone.
Okay. Jerry, I'll kind of repeat it because I'm sitting closer to the phone. So we're talking about meals tax, which does not have an impact on the operational budget, but it does impact EDC, the offsets for the school complex, and then also the capital budget. That's where those monies go. It's projected at I'm sorry, say that again?
Yes, I saw that on page 5.
Okay, great. So we want to know where we want to go with that number. Jim, do you have any thoughts?
I'm looking at least a 50% reduction in meals tax.
I would, my personal opinion is,
This is Paul speaking.
yeah, Paul speaking, sorry. Do the 100,000, so that would go down to what, 115? Do the $100,000 and put $15,000 in EDC.
So you're talking a 50% decrease as well?
Yeah, it was a 15%, it's about it's a little bit more than a 50% decrease but maybe we can make it 23, add $8,000 to it and make it 123,000 instead of 230. And
So,
the
Paul-
remaining balance for capital projects, we're gonna have to hold off on that. That would be, Chris?
I would like to see something go to the capital project, only because we don't want to end up stacking up capital projects for the future. If this goes long-term, you know, you don't want to end up with a bunch of buildings and a bunch of trucks and everything else that need to be replaced all at once
Yeah.
again. So at least, you know, and I wouldn't even spitball a number, but,
Yeah.
you know.
This is Jim. Pam, what's the impact on a taxpayer of that $100,000? I mean, it's pennies.
Yes.
It's $37 for the three of them. There's 100,000 from meals tax, 100,000 from wind turbine, and 100,000 from solar array, works out to about $37.
So $10, $10, $12 a taxpayer, basically.
Right.
I mean, I would forego the debt relief and do the EDC and the capital, as Chris said, because for $12 on the tax rate, I'm gonna end up asking them for more money in 2 years when I need a $2 million capital budget just to fix all the shit that I haven't fixed over the last 2 years. So I would go the other way,
Okay.
reduce it by the 50%, but still do EDC and still do capital.
I agree with Jim.
So one quick thing, when you're speaking, just say your name so the people on the phone can know who it is.
I thought I was very distinctive.
This is Pam. I agree with what Jim said. I'd take the $100,000 off for the debt, for the taxpayers' relief, and I would do the capital project and the EDC.
Any other thoughts? Ron?
EDC is outside of my area of expertise. I would just echo the sentiment that if we can continue with our capital plan as best we can, it's good planning for the future.
Jerry, any thoughts on, so we're talking first is like a 50% decrease, and then the breakup, we're still kind of debating. Any thoughts on that, Jerry?
No, I'll defer on that. My bigger concerns are the state aid and the school budget.
Okay. Joe?
I totally agree with at least a 50% reduction.
Okay. And who am I missing?
Peter Gates.
Peter, sorry. Peter, any thoughts?
Yeah, I would defer to you all on the meal tax reduction, but I would echo what Gary said. I just focus on the state aid and the school budget.
Yep. We'll be getting to that in a second. So, all right, so it seems like we're in favor of a 50% decrease, and it's just a matter of how we're going to apportion it. What sort of commitment did we make for the $100,000 to the taxpayers?
Before my time's on.
It was verbal only. There were no votes to support it, it was verbal only.
So there's never been a vote on it? Okay.
And we still have the 100,000 from solar array and 100,000 from wind turbine to offset it as well.
Yeah.
So how does that hit that's below the line?
Yeah, those two are below the line, you don't see them.
Okay, so the two options are, I think Paul mentioned,
I'll withdraw my option. Yeah, without a doubt.
okay, Paul has changed his mind. So somebody make a motion in terms of how to drop it to 115 and then how to allocate it.
I make a motion, we reduce the meals tax estimate for fiscal '21 to $115,000 and utilize the $115,000 to support the capital plan and to support the EDC at a $31,000 level. So that would leave $84,000, which is currently built into the capital plan, and then $31,000 for the EDC. EDC has other areas where it can get funds to make up the difference to their balance.
Has the $84,000 been allocated?
It has.
It is.
Okay. Any opposition to that motion? For further discussion?
Need a second.
Second by Mr. Boudreau. We'll do a roll call vote. Actually, you know what? We're going to do, because we're all in favor, we're just going to do the vote at the end. Does that make sense? Okay. You've got that noted, right? Nancy, we'll do just one big motion at the end.
Got it.
Okay, local receipts is the next topic that we're talking about. The forecast currently has $5.6 million in it. Nancy, why don't you go through the impact of those 5 items?
Okay, so these are the 5 items that excuse me, talking loud, I'm just trying to get to the conference line as well. The 5 items that I identified that I thought had some type of vulnerability to an economic recession: investment income due to the rates and the Fed's action on those permits. If continued development does not occur or it gets slowed down, we will not have the permit revenue. Penalties and interest. If people have lost their positions or experiencing economic hardship, they will not be able to pay their taxes. So in the short term, we will not see as much in penalties and interest. When that turns around, we would see that tick back up. School Medicaid, I don't know where that's going to go as a revenue source. Our estimate for fiscal '20 is $75,000, and so far we've only taken in $4,600.
Yeah.
So it's a very unstable revenue source on its own. So in this environment, I'm concerned about it. And in motor vehicle excise, it is dictated by sales of new vehicles and leases of new vehicles. If people decide not to buy or to roll over their leases to a new vehicle, our commitments will go down and our receipts will go down as well.
Do you have any data for the last 2 months that would show any kind of pattern as to how much is going down?
Other than investment income, no, we haven't seen anything else really go down. But there hasn't been enough time.
So you're the closest to this, and maybe Pam, you as well. What is your opinion on these items?
Well, I agree that they're definitely going to decrease. I personally haven't seen a decrease in the permits as of now, because a lot of the independent contractors are still working. I think permits have definitely increased. I haven't seen that hit yet. But the other, I do believe that, well, we've seen school Medicaid definitely has come in low. And motor vehicle excise, it's hard to tell. People in Scituate still seem to drive around nice cars, so I don't really know if that would be impacted. Definitely the investment income and penalties and interest. Penalties and interest probably aren't going to exist much, because we're trying to give everybody a relief in that aspect, letting them pay their bills later.
Right.
So I definitely agree with what Nancy has here. The only thing I might not agree with is the permits and the motor vehicle excise.
Nancy, what's our collection year to date, the local receipts total?
It's right there on the screen. We've already met our budget for fiscal '20. We're a little bit over right now. So we're over the 5.6.
Say it again?
We're over 5.6 million for fiscal '20. So we've met our fiscal '20 revenue estimate.
All right, so this is 21 now.
Right, I'm telling you, he asked me what we've done for '20.
So what is your opinion on reductions for these items, Nancy?
Right now, we weren't talking about reducing local receipts. As people mentioned, we know for a fact that investment income will go down if the Fed keeps the rates depressed, but we have a very low estimate. So right now, you can see the fiscal year date is almost twice what our estimate is. So I think we could retain our estimate and be fine. Permits, as has been spoken about, we are still seeing development. There doesn't seem to be any slowdown, so I don't think that's going to be impacted currently. Penalties and interest, it could be an issue. We might be able to make it up in other sources. Motor vehicle excise is very much a concern. Historically, you can see a dip when recession hits, but where our estimate is, when we're surpassing it, probably we'll surpass it by $100,000 to $200,000, we have a little bit of a cushion. So I'm a little resistant to going down too much in local receipts or at all until we know more of where the economy's going.
I will take on North River. I will call Mike over at North River, and he will in turn get a hold of UMass, who does the Medicaid billing, and find out where we're at on that. I'm a little surprised at $4,600 so far this year, when we've gone 2/3 of the year, and we're continually doing what we need to do. So I'll take that one. I'll call Mike as soon as we get out of here, find out where that is.
And I wonder, oftentimes we get a dump of money in June.
Yeah.
And with the stay-at-home order, a lot of the federal government is staying at home. So it
Right.
could be that these aren't being processed because there's no one to process them.
So, Nancy, just to get the numbers on the right, the 140, the 550, the 348 are what are in the forecast.
Correct.
Okay, so your opinion is to keep it the same?
Yes, I would not raise it. I think we would be okay to keep it the same. We just have to watch it very closely. But we could, if you want to do a reduction, I think 5%, I wouldn't go beyond 5%. I don't know what Jim thinks.
Jim?
I mean, at this point, I was holding local receipts steady. Just again, there's a lack of information. I think if we see a dip, I don't think it's going to be a huge dip. But right now, 5% is what? Almost $300,000
Yeah,
that we have to make up.
it layers on another issue.
But right now, I'm not completely comfortable, but I was leaving local receipts level for fiscal '21.
Okay, you guys on the phone, you've heard Jim, Pam, Paul, and Nancy's opinion. I'll just go one at a time. Jerry, any thoughts?
No, I agree with you.
Joe?
I agree with Jim. I think we should be conservative at this point.
And Peter?
I would agree. I would go with Jim's recommendation.
Okay.
No, it doesn't come through, don't blame me.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's, I think it's gonna reduce. I mean, I think we're probably, there may be some areas that aren't, but clearly it's gonna go down some in some of these areas. And again, this is just modeling right now. So I think we've got to probably be a little bit more conservative, at least throw this into our mix of that going down some percent in our models. I think what the outcome of this is going to be is there's going to be, 3 or 4 or 5 different plans that are going to come out of this where we say reduce this by 5%, reduce it by 10%, so that we're just prepared and both the town and the school will be able to say, okay, if this is where it falls, this is our action plan. So I think one of the variables should be this going down some.
I don't like the penalties and interest line.
Yeah.
I don't like that.
So we're at 348. I'm sorry, 384. Yeah, and I don't like the Medicare line either, the investment income, we look like we have some buffer there. The permits, building is still going, and look how high it is already. That looks fine. And I think Jim's point is some of that overflow can cover shortages on others.
I can say on the school Medicaid, this is Ron, on the school Medicaid, we continue to do reporting pretty regularly, and we haven't seen a dip in service or reporting. So I just underscored that it's entirely possible there's a delay in the payment process, and I would caution us to make major changes on that, at least for right now. We may be able to get some better information after Paul makes a few calls on it, but from the back end, from our end, the service provider, there hasn't been a change, so I wouldn't anticipate a major shift in the school Medicaid, at least at this moment.
So does it make sense in our modeling just to put one scenario with this thing flat and one scenario with it going down 5%?
Well, we can model it, it's just gonna be a really awful model.
Well,
You know, when I look at it, I look at the bottom line. Nancy and I go through it line by line, but when I'm talking reduction, I look at the bottom line. Joe, permits are still going pretty well, Toll Brothers is still flying. We haven't heard on Drew Company, but we do have the potential of Drew Company starting, which will boost our permits even more. So as Tony said, I think there will be some ones that'll buffer some of the other ones. If you want to run a scenario with a 5% reduction, a 5% reduction is another $280,000, I think, out of the revenue stream.
well, that's just my thought. So we're a committee here, so what's the consensus? Is the consensus still to keep it flat, that we've got areas to cover any shortfalls we'll have?
Maybe we think about somewhere in the middle, right? If we're modeling here, and we're hearing is this like tension between what the worst case, which is around 5, and potentially flat, maybe we model it 2.5%, and that's a conservative estimate.
If you model it at 2.5%.
Okay. Everyone good with that? All right, so we'll make a motion to that at the end also. So we've got meals, 50%, and local receipts, 2.5%. Okay. Nancy, is the next one state aid?
Yes, property tax, we just wanted to mention that we spoke to Joe earlier, I spoke to him, and he's still comfortable with the new growth estimate of 6,650 for fiscal 21. So the state aid is the next item to chat about.
So Joe, just so we hear it from you, you're fine with the new growth number staying the same?
I'm very comfortable with that.
Okay.
Hopefully, as time goes on, that number can be increased. At this point, 650, very comfortable.
Great. Any comments on that? Okay, we'll move forward to state aid then. Oh,
Any concerns that the property tax receipt numbers will be negatively impacted by job loss?
Nancy?
We'll still collect the same amount of property tax. It'll be a liquidity issue if we don't get it within the fiscal year limitations. So the overall total will be the same that's collectible, and it's 100% collectible because of what it is. But it may be a liquidity issue if for some reason all of a sudden we're not collecting. But I have not seen that in prior recessions, so I've not had that problem.
Nancy, that's my concern, is that it will be current revenue, it will be a tax lien that will be collectible at some point in time.
Correct, but I also think you have to remember the demographic of Scituate and how many people have mortgage companies. And the mortgage companies will not allow the lien to be placed. They will upfront the tax money. So we know at least 50% of our payments are coming from mortgage companies, probably more.
So Jerry, the taxes are not a budget issue, this is Jim, the taxes collection is not a budget issue, it's potentially a liquidity issue in terms of cash coming in, but we still count it as if it's collected in terms of budgets.
Yeah, I understand, Jim, but liquidity is key in running the town.
That's correct, but we just did the $12 million ban to pay back all our interfund loans, so we have some money back in our bank accounts in terms of liquidity. I'm not too worried about it yet. I think that'll be later in the next fiscal year if we see things trending the wrong way. And then the state does have mechanisms you can use, tax anticipation notes and some other things if you have liquidity issues. So I'm not really worried about the property tax in terms of budget or liquidity. I think we have sufficient liquidity. And again, the state has some tools that we can use if it becomes a problem.
Yeah, okay.
Any other questions on that topic before we get to state aid? Okay, so state aid is the big elephant in the room. we budget, the current forecast has $8.7 million in it. That was based on the governor's budget. And we really don't have much indication of where he's going with it. So a lot of this is guesswork. Nancy, why don't you give us your thoughts on it first? And then...
Okay, so my thoughts, I'm just going to bring up what's in your packets, which is what's happened historically when there's an economic impact to the state's revenues. You will see a massive reduction in state aid that will last for a few years. That's what I'm fearful of right now, especially where, as you can see on the other end of that chart, the last 2 years of state aid increases have been dramatic as they've been trying to do something with Chapter 70. I think that's the first thing that will be pared back, not because it's not necessary, but because it was an add-on. What's making this all the more complicated and philosophical at this point is that the state's not providing any information whatsoever because they don't have any to provide. And now there are the coronavirus relief funds that the state has received. There is legislation in Washington currently that they could potentially use a portion of that to make whole their revenue problems for fiscal 21. So if that legislation passes, that gives them an ability to deal with their revenue problems. Right now, all of the aid that's coming out is only for expenses. You can't use it to fill the revenue hole. So that would dramatically change all of our discussions. But for right now, I think based on what's happened in the past, I couldn't get around the slide, but I mean, both Jim and I have been, and Tony have been around. We remember all this back when Romney was governor back in 2003, and 10% is probably a starting point. I know Mass taxpayers was calling for a 14% reduction in state revenues, and that was not a worst-case scenario.
Jim, you want to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, right now, I'm thinking 10% is a starting point. I got an email yesterday from the town administrator of Westport. His state senator is the chair of Ways and Means. They were talking a 20% reduction in local aid. I think that's a little high, but I think 10 is a good starting point, but it's getting softer by the day, and I think it's going to go up. The two keys are, as Nancy said, whether they let us reposition the CARES Act to replace lost revenue, or whether they do a subsequent bailout bill to give more monies to cities and towns. I know the House is voting on a bill today, $3 trillion that has money for states, cities, and towns, but I've heard it's dead on arrival in the Senate. So I think 10% is a good starting number, but we have to be prepared for that number to go up.
And just for clarification, you're saying a 10% decrease from last year's level?
From fiscal year 20 levels, that's correct. So wipe out any increases we got for this year, and then 10% from that.
So Nancy, what did we project the increase? Was it 8?
It was over $500,000 increase. So we would knock that off and then take another 10%.
So did everyone on the phone hear that? So the state aid number reductions that we're talking is from last year's number, and we projected this year's number to be $500,000 above last year based on the governor's budget.
So that's what, I brought up a slide that shows those reductions. So the first one is the fiscal 20 level, it's slide 12 for those who are following along on the call. This third one is the fiscal 20 level, that's 10%. So you can see it's significant. It's almost a $1.4 million decrease in just that one revenue stream.
So we're looking at slide number 12, for those of you remotely. So again, there's no indication of what it's going to be at all, whether there'll be federal support or what the state is going to do, but it just seems to be very likely that it will be reduced. And the reason we're here is to just get models in place, so if it is reduced, we'll have already thought about what steps we'll have to take beforehand. Right?
Yes.
Okay. So I'll open it up to you. So on page 12, Nancy drew up 4 scenarios really 2, 3, and 4 are what we're talking about, which is a 5% decrease, a 10% decrease, and a 15% decrease. So I think the suggestion that Nancy, Jim, and I came to was that we should probably model all 3 of those, figure out what reductions there could be in budgets, and just have a plan in place to be able to act depending on which one of those comes into play. What's number 1, Nancy? Is that just level?
Level funded to fiscal 20.
So we could throw that one in as well, I guess.
Yeah, because that's where we were originally until March when we changed it.
So do you have just the straight numbers there? So if we level funded, it's going to be, our budget's going to go down $500,000?
Yeah, so in the yellow column, the bottom 2
Those
numbers
2
here,
numbers?
that would be the school's share and the town share that would be lost in each one of those scenarios.
Okay, so it's 530,000 at level, it's
sorry.
950,000.
The second line down, Tony, will tell you the overall total. So negative 949 for scenario 2, split up as 632 and 316.
I don't see that, but.
Yeah.
Let me do my man white.
Oh, good. Oh, good, up there.
Yeah, and then this is how it splits up in the share. And I do apologize for everyone who just saw my nails because it's been 2 months. The best I can do.
So we're looking at reductions between $500,000 and $1.7 million. Okay, I'll open it up to everybody. Ron, do you want to go first?
Yeah, I echo what Nancy was saying about the Student Opportunity Act. I think that was a huge opportunity for the state. I think it's been a long time coming. They've been talking about this for a decade. How do we, upgrade Chapter 70 to be, meeting the 21st century needs of kids? But that's the last money in, so it's likely to be the first money out. That was resources that I think everyone was counting on for a variety of reasons. So I would echo the sentiment that 10% seems, while painful, seems like a reasonable starting place to look at state aid for next year.
Paul, we'll stay with the school.
Yeah, I'm with Ron on that one. Obviously, it's been a long time. They've been hearing about this in my 15 years. They were gonna revamp that, and then they finally are starting to do it, but it's probably the first one to go. But I would echo 10%.
Peter, we'll stay on the school. What's your thoughts? Any additional thoughts?
No, unfortunately, I think I do have to agree with what you and Paul said. I wish it wasn't true. The only question I had is in the total remaining revenue. We talked earlier about the meal tax. That doesn't impact the net revenue number, correct? A reduction there?
Correct.
Correct.
Okay. But yeah, otherwise, unfortunately, I do agree.
Okay. So I'm going to go to the town side, Jim. I know you've helped put this together. So when we say we agree, I guess if we had to go to the public with a number, we'd say 10% down from last year. But I think the modeling should go all the way to the 15%. So we should do models at these 4 levels. Right, so, Nancy, you'll pull up a scenario that says we lose 537,000, or that's the total budget. And then Paul, you'll do the same. Okay. Jerry, I'll go to advisory.
Yeah, I'm obviously very concerned about the 10% scenario. I don't disagree that it may be realistic. And from what I understand, Nancy saying is that the 10% number is far more of a cut because you're operating on our projected 20 revenues rather than our actual 20 revenues, Nancy?
We're operating off our actual fiscal 20 state aid.
Okay.
But it's our current forecast shows that increasing, so we've got that delta to make up first.
Exactly, that's what I was trying to.
Right.
My concern is, the quality of the education that we're going to provide to the school children. in a scenario that we've got a $900,000 tax budget plus whatever 2/3 of 8% would be. So you're really looking at 14 or 15% tax budget, right?
Yeah, I think Nancy's numbers include bringing it down that 8%. So if you're looking at column 3, and correct me if I'm wrong, Nancy, the 1.359 million includes bringing it from our forecast to 10% below last year.
You're correct.
Got it, okay. But still, in a school budget, to find $900,000, that's significant, an increase in class size, a decrease in teachers, a decrease in program offerings. I don't know how you get to $900,000, it's going to be a challenge.
It's very difficult. I'm going to let Ron comment.
Sure. Jerry, thank you. This is Ron here. I agree with you. It's a huge challenge for us. I will say this is something we've been modeling internally for a couple of weeks now. I mean, you just read the newspapers, you hear the conversations that they're having at Beacon Hill around revenue. I would just caution the reactionary response here. I think there are a lot of options that can be at our fingertips that minimize the impact on kids, that minimize the impact on programs. We've already started having some of those conversations, and we're thankful to have this group here today so we can get some firmer projections and start to do some work behind the scenes, and then hopefully in the coming weeks have some plans that we roll out that minimize the impact across the board.
Great.
Well, good luck. I think that we must do scenario analysis based upon the 10% reduction from fiscal year 20. It just isn't going to be pretty.
Yeah, I think we all agree, Jerry. Joe, any comments from you?
Prior to the meeting, I came into this thinking at least level fund, at least, track that 500,000. But after listening to Jim, Nancy, and everyone else, it makes sense. Use that 10% reduction.
Okay. So the one thing I'll say is, Scituate's in a pretty good position. There's other communities that this will just devastate. So, I think there's some chance that there'll be some sort of federal or state relief to this. They're certainly not going to, hopefully cut numbers too bad, because the impact will be, like I said, devastating on a lot of communities. So, Chris, did you have any comments?
I tend to feel we model for doomsday and model much higher than that. And I'm just looking at the historical state aid page, and back in 2010, when they reduced by 11.8, it took us 10 years to get back up to that. So even modeling that going forward, it's going to take us 10 years to come back up to what we're bringing in now.
Right. So we'll roll that into our 5-year model. Right now, I think we're just trying to get to 21 in this meeting anyway. Pam, did you have anything?
No, I agree with the
Okay.
10% reduction.
Okay.
So we need to prepare the lower number, the 10%, so Ryan can prepare, I can prepare. If it doesn't come to pass, it's easier to add money back later than to take more out. So I think we might have to be talking 15% shortly, but I think right now the 10% number is a good, solid number to start with. I know the vast majority of communities on the South Shore are all working off that same 10% thought at this point.
So I want to get it right. I think we agree that 10% is probably going to be what we think the number may come in at. But we're going to do models at all 4 of these. So, Paul, you're going to have the 10% number and say, here's what it is. But if it is 15, then, we've got to cut whatever we have to cut. No pencils or something. Is that, everyone agree with that?
Yeah.
So, Paul, you and Nancy have, scenario 1's going to cut A, B, C, scenario 2 is going to cut A, B, C, D, and E, scenario 3 is going to cut more, and and more, and we'll just see where it falls and just be prepared.
Yep.
Okay. Is it Bill or William?
Bill.
Bill.
Please.
Our new superintendent, Bill, was here, and I just wanted to kind of give you the opportunity to give a quick comment at this point, too, if you're coming into this mess, so.
See if you changed your mind.
No, it's just about where I am, so it's, I would say that it's very consistent, these conversations are happening everywhere. I would defer to Ron and Paul right now until I look deeper at the school numbers. They have shared some contingency plans
Yeah.
with me that I think they're well prepared to put us in a good place, so we'll continue the conversation. So I just appreciate being here today to kind of catch up to speed, so
Okay.
thank you.
Yeah, and Ron and Paul, as I said, have been working on this for weeks, so we're not coming into this with our head in the sand. Nancy, so there's a couple other expense line items that we thought we should go through. The first one's on the screen, it's unemployment. So Nancy, I'll let you go over your numbers there.
So the concern we have about unemployment is in our forecast, we level funded it for $65,000, which has been more than an ample budget for us. But if because of these state aid potential cuts, if these come to pass, it is more than likely necessary to have some type of a layoff situation, especially on the school side, if they cannot make all of these cuts on expenses alone. And what I want to provide to you is some of our experience in the past when there was a recession and there were layoffs, and how that affected unemployment and what that's going to mean to us. So in addition to the $900,000 reduction, if you're going to need to make up $300,000 or $400,000 of that in payroll, we have to increase our unemployment budget for that, and you have to take a further reduction to make that happen. So we have a couple things to talk about. I did want to point out to everyone that since March, the town has received $145,000 worth of unemployment claims in a single month. We don't know how much of those we'll have to pay out, how much will be supported by state and local offsets. We haven't been able to get answers on that, and we haven't seen a bill yet. So we'll have to wait and see how that develops. The other line item, I'm going to get back to unemployment, is workers' compensation. The forecast committee at their March meeting decided to put additional funds, savings from health insurance, from the rates that came in, into the workers' compensation trust fund, which has been badly affected in the last 3 years, which are highlighted on that slide. As you can see, we were putting $210,000 aside. In the last 3 years, we have gone over that amount. So our trust fund has been badly impacted. The goal for the trust fund is $750. We were almost at $650. It's now down to $375. So we have increased it an additional $177,000. The forecast committee could choose, based on what's happening in the environment, to mitigate some of the unemployment costs that we might have to add to the budget by decreasing this 177 back down. So we were going to put in 210, it's up to 387. We could dial it back to 210 and use the 177 to offset the unemployment. So that's just something that could be used.
So 177,000 in addition to the 210?
Yes. So health insurance and OPEB, I don't recommend making any changes. As Pam has pointed out before in our conversations with Jim and I, and Tony as well, I believe, that in this type of environment where you have a lot of people losing their jobs, if their spouse is still employed by the town, or if it's a child that's lost their job, they're going to come back on our plan. So we will see a pickup in our health insurance, so we don't want to take any flexibility away from that budget. And we certainly don't want to backtrack on OPEB as it is. It's not that much of a material expense line that we wouldn't want to take the impact of the credit rating agency to eliminate it at this time, in my opinion.
So one question before you go. What about if there's unemployment, then the federal taxes are going to go down?
The federal taxes will go down, but it'll only be 1.45% of whatever the payroll is that we won't cover. So it's so immaterial, I didn't even bother putting it on.
So they won't have an impact, okay.
I did have it there, but it was a waste of a slide. So getting back to the unemployment issue, this is again where we're getting into the gray area is we don't know what's going to happen. Normally, when you're going to have a layoff, you budget for 26 weeks. So if you're going to lay off a $50,000 position, you're only going to have half of that savings, $25,000. You're going to pay the other half in unemployment. Unemployment benefits have been extended to 39 weeks. So now it's a 75% loss. So when you lay off $100,000 worth of payroll costs, you're only going to recoup $25,000. So we have to significantly increase the amount of payroll layoffs that we would normally have to do in order to recoup the payroll dollars that we actually needed in net. What we don't know is we do not know if the federal government is going to pay 50% of the unemployment costs. Supposedly the CARES Act has that in it, that the claims that we are currently seeing for COVID-19 related unemployment will be covered 50%. We cannot get confirmation of it. We've gone, Jim and I have both sent an email going out to Jim Cantwell in Milford's office trying to get confirmation that that was in the CARES Act and we will actually see it. Some of the things that do come out we do not benefit from because we're a reimbursable employer, meaning we pay our claims. We're not part of the state trust fund. Also, is it going to be 26 weeks or 39 weeks? Are we going to see a 50% offset or not? Because the question I would have is this a COVID-19 related unemployment? If we lay people off to meet our budget, is that specific to COVID-19 or is that specific to economic issues? I don't even know if this would qualify, even if we were to get funds. So just to throw a little...
Right, so everyone's in the same boat, so, hopefully the federal government or the state government will understand that, hopefully. But what Nancy brings up, and Jim and I have spoken about this in the past, it's a very difficult question because laying off people does not solve the problem. You only get 25% of the impact of a layoff because you're going to be paying unemployment for 39 weeks. So that makes this whole thing more difficult, right? Especially in a school where 90% of your budget is payroll.
So excuse me if I interrupt you, Mr. Chair. I think we need to decide whether we're going to assume 26 or 39 weeks, so at least we know what our modeling is to have, and whether or not we're going to assume a 50% offset from the federal government or not.
Well, I think what we have to do is decide for our budget just where we want that unemployment number to go to and take those numbers into account. So if you go back to that slide for 1 second,
Which one are you going back to?
the unemployment. So we budgeted at,
65,000.
is it the next one? Oh, I'm sorry, yeah, there. So we budgeted $65,000. You just said we had $145,000 last month.
In claims.
So what does that turn into money?
We don't know, because those people have been awarded a determination whether or not they ever collect. So a lot of times you'll see someone, especially on the school side, they'll collect over the summer, and then in September they get a job, and then they fall off. So you have a $20,000 liability, you paid $2,000, it was gone.
So is 145 the duration of the whole claim?
Yes,
Okay.
so far,
That's the exposure level right now.
Right.
yes.
Right, it's not that expenditure for that month.
And one of the problems back in 2010, 2011 was, it's not a problem, they were holding a lot of their stuff. Now they're not holding anything, they're just paying, right?
Yeah.
And so we sent in saying, Paul Donham is a substitute teacher. He's only getting $75 a day, but he got laid off from, Procter & Gamble. And, so that sometimes comes against us. So we said, this is just a substitute teacher, and there's a list of, 10 people or 15 people. Our claim is only, we've given them $500 or whatever that number is from this year, from the last quarter. They go by quarters, right? I don't think that the 145 doesn't make sense right now because it's probably all us on the school side.
A lot of it is you and people
Yeah.
who shouldn't be getting funds who have applied for funds, but we
Right.
just don't know if they're going to be paid out, and where everything is moving so
Right.
quickly.
Right.
Money's going out the door. We don't get those funds back.
Right.
And I want to underscore on the unemployment level, we have 518 employees. We made a commitment early on in this pandemic that we're going to maintain the 518 employees no matter what, right through the end of the school year. Everyone's going to pitch in and try to do things differently, be it remote learning, distance learning, helping transport materials, and we're all going to pitch in different ways because the world is different right now. But the school department's made a commitment to its employees because we think that's the right thing to do. And so my point is the unemployment number that you see there on exposure, all of those employees, with the exception of substitutes or temporary staff, are getting paid full rate. So I'd be surprised if that total exposure yielded, that as an actual expense.
Right, because it's not coming from the school side.
Right,
And the town doesn't lay anybody off.
right.
No, but that doesn't mean we won't have to pay.
Right.
We are a reimbursable account employer.
Right, so that's where at least in 10 and 11, we control that. You're not controlling anything. UTMC is, they've got furloughed people, the Randolph's furloughing, this one's furloughing, we got Rockland furloughing. So they're paying, and they're just paying.
Let's just add a layer to that. So if someone's got a second job
Right, that's where,
and they get furloughed from that job, but they also work with us, they can apply for unemployment. And we get dinged on it as well.
Yeah, because we're a reimbursable account.
Is that going to get reconciled though? Or does,
hopefully it will,
It
because
used to, but it's been a lot faster now. Everything's going on.
they're just paying right now. Tony. That's
We
where,
can't even appeal, we're not even getting notifications, like that so-and-so has applied.
no, I understand that, but is that going to fix itself in 3-6 months?
As a reimbursable account, it doesn't fix itself. It has to wait until that person applies for unemployment in the future, and then they take out whatever they get overpaid, and we get reimbursed then. We're not part of the state trust fund. There's two different types of employers. We're the reimbursable one. That means we pay lower overall in normal conditions, but when something like this happens, or there's a recession, we can get dinged.
So, just to go to Ron's scenario, so somebody works somewhere else, they work part-time for us, they file for unemployment, the other person, it comes to us, we pay a larger amount of money because they work for
So say that employer never reopens, so
Right.
say they had a full-time job at a restaurant, the restaurant never reopens, we'll be paying the unemployment because we're the last employer standing.
Yeah.
So I mean,
At the full
that's,
amount, not based on our money we pay them.
no, we could be paying a full amount, we could get dinged for a lot more than what our normal liability would be.
So, Jim, I'll get your input before what do you think about this line item?
I think it has to go up.
So what about taking 177,000 that we were adding to the workers' comp and applying it to this? Or some portion of it?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if I want to take it all right now. We can always go back and move it later. It's just a bookkeeping transfer, right, Nancy? It's nothing anybody votes on.
Well, we part of the budget,
yeah.
so we just have to go back to town meeting and fix it.
I probably want to move at least 100.
Yeah, I'd say at least 100, but
I'd move at least 100 at this point, and then we always have a town meeting in the fall, so if it's running poorly, we can go back to the fall town meeting and move more, but I would definitely recommend moving 100 at this point.
Okay. So that'll have no impact on the budget. We're just going to move it from the extra money we're going to put in workers' comp, and then we're going to move it over to unemployment is what's being suggested. Chris?
Chris Karsha, is there a potential that workers' comp claims can be filed because of COVID? And should we not take away from workers' comp in case of that?
I don't
There's a
know.
potential for anything, but it would have to say how it was to do with their work. So the ones I would think that would be at risk would be fire, police.
Fire, police.
They don't
They're
fall under
different
workers'
than
comp, they're a
workers'
different
comp.
section of law. So it wouldn't impact this line.
And workers' comp does impact the budget. It's above the line, so it's part of the revenue, the liability. So it is sitting here at 387. If we move $100,000, that goes to the bottom, that's 66.
No, because we're just gonna move it from another line.
You're gonna move it over to, okay.
We're just moving stuff above the line to different lines, so it's not impacting the bottom line budget, we're just moving it around.
Okay. All right.
Okay. Any comments from Jerry? Joe
No comments.
or Peter? Okay. That's the last topic, right?
Yes, so we have to decide how much to increase unemployment, because that will change our modeling. So where would you like to go, Mr.
So
Chair?
I think oh, go ahead,
Do
Ron.
you mind, I just have a follow-up on something Nancy had mentioned about the 39 weeks. Is there information, or do you expect guidance or information coming from the state or feds regarding the number of weeks they plan to land on? Because I think that would change our modeling pretty dramatically.
Yeah, right now, the unemployment was extended from 26 weeks to 39. I believe it goes to the end of December. I don't know if there's going to be further relief after that, if there's a really slow ramping up. So it's, you know, that it makes a dramatic difference which way we go. And so does whether or not we're going to get a 50% offset.
Yeah, and it also depends on when the economy gets back and going. I mean, just in the Globe today, it said, you know, there's just a poll in terms of how many people are going to get back to work when they were able to. And it was above 50% were, and I think it was like 20% that they said maybe their jobs would not be available to them. So if the jobs come back, the unemployment's going to go down.
Sure.
And I don't know what the school committee's plans will be for issuing letters of continuing employment. And that will affect unemployment as well.
We're planning on,
Rolling those continuing
if
employment.
you're here in June, you're gonna be here in September. That's the plan right now.
Yeah, because that would keep people from being able
Right.
to work
That
collect
is-
over the summer.
So let's go out in the middle of June for us.
Right.
Our commitment is to try again, keep every person who is here, continue to be here for our kids. When we get back to normalcy, whenever that is, we need all of those employees supporting our students, driving our buses, teaching them calculus, taking care of the food, like all of that together. So I caution our colleagues around the Commonwealth from being too quick to cut.
I'm just concerned that based on looking at a 10% off fiscal 28, that 165 is woefully inadequate as an unemployment number.
Well, we can adjust it if we need to. I mean, even at our peaks, you know, it's in the ballpark.
Would you suggest moving the whole amount over, Nancy? or-
As much as I hate to do it, I think so, because we can move it back.
I'm fine with that too.
Okay. I mean, it's just bookkeeping, so.
Hey.
Hey, it's my career. Okay. All right, so here's what I think our conclusions were, and we'll make a motion to reduce the meals tax by 50% to, what the heck did I write down?
Do you want me to go through your?
I'm sorry, local receipts, model that at 2.5% down. Also model reductions in state aid at 4 levels. One will be even with last year, down 5%, down 10%, and down 15%. And the other one will move the $177,000 from workman's comp to unemployment. Did I get them all, Nancy?
Yes.
All right, can I have a motion for that?
Can I ask a question before you make your motion? Will the unemployment number stay the same in all 4 models?
Yes.
Okay.
I'll make a motion as Tony presented those motions.
A second.
Second by Chris. Further discussion?
Could I don't mean to complicate it, I apologize, I just want to double back on something Nancy said. If you're looking at a 15% decrease, potential 50% decrease in state and local aid versus level funded 20, it would seem logical that you may have an increase in unemployment at that 15% number. And so I don't mean to complicate it, I know we're close to the end here, but I also want to have as true a reflection as we can. Offer some amendment, and I yield to Nancy's expertise on what that might look like to proportionally increase unemployment at that 10 and 15% threshold. I'm sorry to throw a wrench in that. I think that's a lot.
I think that's 15 definitely, we need to probably go to the 4. We'd have to take 130 out of the revenue stream and put it against.
Or we'll just increase the expenses, which would just make your,
Yeah.
what you
It
have.
would make the gap larger, unfortunately.
You will make the gap larger. right.
Okay, so in your models, you'll have to, at the, I think, we think that at the 10% level, this moving to 177 will be
Yeah, that's
good. At the 15% level, that's increased that another 50,000?
So I think you said one to 400,000?
Yeah, go to the 400 that we originally were talking about.
Okay.
Yep, let's go to 4, at 15. I think that's a good strategy, yep.
Okay. All right, so I have a motion, a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, we'll do a roll call vote.
Mr. Vignani?
Yes?
Sorry, Mr. Sordini. Mr. Karsha?
Yes.
Mr. Kelly? Mr. Kelly? Jerry?
Yes?
Okay.
Mr. Gates?
Yes?
Mr. DeVito?
Yes.
Mr. Boudreau?
Yes?
Mr. Griffin?
Yes.
Mr. Donlin?
Yes.
Dan?
Yes.
And since I didn't go last time, yes.
Okay, and Nancy, yes. Great, so that is unanimous. We'll move forward with that. If there's nothing else,
We didn't accept agenda.
We did
The March 13th.
the minutes.
oh, minutes.
The minutes from March 13th.
Can I have a motion to accept the minutes of March 13th? Motion. Moved by Ken Concha, second by Mr. Donlin. We'll do a roll call again.
Tony?
Yes.
Jim?
Yes?
Paul?
Yes.
Chris?
Yes.
Ron?
Yes.
Pam?
Yes.
Nancy, yes. Jerry? Mr. Kelly?
I abstain.
Abstain.
Oh.
Mr. DeVito?
Yes.
Mr. Gates?
Yes?
Great, that is all but one extension, if one person abstained. If there's nothing else, then we'll just have a motion to adjourn.
Just one more.
I have a question.
Okay, one sec, go ahead, Peter.
Just curious, the timing of these models and kind of what our next steps are. So Nancy, I assume, will be the modeler. And in what capacity will we receive those revisions, and will we meet again as a financial forecast committee to review them?
Yes, we will. I mean, it'll probably take
I
a
can have it done
couple.
today.
Yeah.
I have no social life. I have no problem with it.
So we'll have the models done, but I think Paul and Ron are gonna have to spend some time to get to those lower levels to get the details to it, and the school committee as well. So,
Mr. Gates and I, along with the chairperson, Ms. Limbaugh, have been meeting about this already. We'll use those as our data for our upcoming meetings that are already slated.
so when do you want to meet again? In a month, Jim, or?
I mean, we'll get these out in a hurry. I think once we get something actually concrete, we'll either plug into the model and meet again and use those numbers if we get anything. I just wanted to say that we don't actually know what town meeting's gonna be yet. Nancy and I know she's talked to Paul, are in the process of developing the 1/12 budgets that we have to submit to the state so that we can actually spend money after July 1st if we have not had town meeting. So that's not a financial forecast, but we will be okay to operate July 1, even if we've not had town meeting.
Okay. So Peter, the answer to your question is,
Our goal would be to ultimately vote on, do we choose one scenario? If town meeting has to be there June 9th or June 10th date, we would need to vote on the financial forecast prior to that, correct?
I don't see town meeting being June 8th at this point. I see us pushing it back again to the end of the month.
So most likely the 112 budget.
I'm sorry?
So most likely we're looking at the 112 budget.
No, I would like to try to have a town meeting at the end of June, but we have to submit the 112 budgets before that in order to get them approved by DOR, just in case.
Okay, thank you.
And it's an important note, it is on, 1/12 is on this fiscal year that we're in right now.
Yeah.
Fiscal year 20. It's 1/12 of fiscal year 20's budgets.
great, so answer your question, Peter, is we will definitely get together before town meeting, and we'll base that on any information that we get from the state. So I would imagine in 2 or 3 weeks.
Okay, but Nancy, I don't expect you to really have it done today. If you did, you would just send it out to this group?
Yeah, I'm going to send it out to this group because it's still a working model for us.
Okay.
I mean, the model is
Great.
not too difficult to get out,
No.
it's whatever you're gonna do to hit those numbers.
Correct,
Yeah.
correct.
Any further comments? All right, seeing none, can I have a motion to adjourn?
Yes,
Oh, go ahead.
no, I've got a comment, Jerry Kelly. First off, I want to thank Jim and Nancy. We pushed you when you come to meet with us about increasing this line item or that, and you were resolved on public services budget. Thank you for doing that. It stands us in a much stronger position than if we had prevailed as an advisory committee. Secondly, please get a better speakerphone because those of us who participate remotely get to enjoy about half the comments. And finally, town meeting. If social distancing requirements prevail, are we going to have it in the football stadium rather than the gym?
We don't want to like that, yes.
We're looking at all options, but we do not know the answer.
Could do 3 different places.
That's it. Good. Any other comments? All right, now can I have a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
No, second.
Second by Mr. Donovan. All in favor, we'll do a roll call.
Aye. Aye.
Mr. Donovan, yes. Mr. Griffin?
Yes.
Chris? Yes. Pam?
Yes.
Peter?
Yes.
Joe?
Yes.
Jerry?
Yes.
Jim?
Yes.
Nancy?
Yes.
Tony, yes. Meeting's adjourned. Thank you all for coming. See you in a couple weeks.